I feel like safety is the foundation of all healing. We have to feel safe. And the human body, the human organism is actually designed to prioritize safety.
Welcome to Intuition Unlocked. This podcast is for women who are craving a deeper return to who they are. Maybe you've lost your spark a little, or feel unsure of your next step, or find yourself searching outside of you for clarity. Well, this space is here to bring you back inward and ignite your heart and soul once more. I'm your host, Olivia Ashley, a mother and intuitive, and I'm so happy you're here. Hello, and welcome into this beautiful episode where we are diving into a conversation that will challenge one of the most common stories many of us carry, which is that we are somehow broken and need fixing before we can feel whole, healthy, or at peace. My guest today is Dr. Karyn Shanks, a physician, pioneer in whole person healing, and author of the book Unbroken: Reclaim Your Wholeness. For more than 3 decades, she has helped people navigate chronic illness, burnout, trauma, and emotional disconnection by bridging cutting-edge science with a deeply human understanding of healing. In this episode, I explore with Karyn how the body communicates through symptoms and what it may be trying to tell us, why safety, belonging, and connection are essential foundations for healing, and how we can move beyond the idea that we are broken and begin reclaiming our wholeness, resilience, and inner wisdom. I think this conversation offers a hopeful and empowering perspective on what it truly means to heal and reconnect with yourself. So settle in. I'm so happy you're here with me, and enjoy this inspiring conversation with Dr. Karyn Shanks. Hello, Karyn. Welcome in, and thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Oh, we're delighted because you are a physician and a pioneer in whole person healing who is really shifting the narrative on how we understand everything in this landscape. So, I want to start off with, when did you begin to realize that the traditional model of medicine was missing something essential about what it means to truly heal?
The very first day of my second year of medical school. And at that time, I would not have been able to tell you what it was that was bothering me so much. But I can tell you that was the time when we transitioned. The whole first year of medical school is the deep dive into the biological sciences, which to me were just magical. And I truly believed that it was going to be the knowledge that then we put together to help people heal. Like we're really going to understand human beings and help them figure out how to heal. And that is not what happened. And it's not that there aren't wondrous things about conventional healthcare, conventional medicine, and important attributes to that particular model of looking at people and helping them. But it wasn't what I was looking for. And it wasn't what I would later learn to understand what healing is all about. It was, let's learn what goes wrong with the human body. Let's give those names, which are, the diseases. So we started to learn diseases. What do they look like under the microscope? What drugs are used to treat those diseases? And it really became something very removed from what I think about when I think about human beings and their rich experience and who they are and all the things that make us who we are, all the things that are connected to what healing actually is. And I was so disappointed. And it took me a really long time to figure that out. But that was followed by other experiences, getting through my residency in internal medicine, my first day in clinic with people who were coming to me with, real everyday things that were causing them distress, like, being tired for long periods of time, all kinds of everyday problems that I realized, gosh, I don't really know what to do. I don't know what to do here. I don't know anything about nutrition. I don't know anything. That's how I was feeling. And so I set about a new course, like a whole new course of educating myself, and learning more about holistic medicine, nutritional biochemistry, trauma biology, all the things that help me understand, and this is over many, many years, what it is to be human.
Yes, it makes a lot of sense that when you were wanting to learn and you're so excited about, okay, we're going to really understand, we're going to pull apart all these little parts and get to know it really well. And I feel like that's where it kind of was left. It was left in those pieces where you could really identify the singularity. But when it came to a whole person, they came in front of you and they're like, well, this is what I have, or this is how I feel. You're like, okay, I can have this one lens, but there's a lot more that you are understanding is actually happening here. And that's what you're looking to discover. Does that make sense?
100%. And then there's also the way medicine is practiced. And you're given 10 or 15 minutes to see a person who's come to you for help. And like, why can't I do this in 10 or 15 minutes? There was so much confusion and so much, I had to just like figure out why I was feeling the way I was feeling by the entire experience of becoming this new doctor, indoctrinated into the traditional way that medicine is practiced, and figure it all out again.
Yes, you
You
really got
know,
sent on a quest to
I
better
was.
understand.
Yes, and I accepted that question. And it's interesting that many physicians don't do that. And this really isn't meant to be a criticism, because I think we all have our purpose and we all are doing our very best to make sense of things, but a lot of physicians feel really locked into the paradigm, not only how to think about people and what goes wrong and what they need, but also the way it's actually practiced, the setting, the amount of time you spend with people, what kinds of questions you ask, what kinds of information you bring into the understanding of this person. And I think that's just human nature, especially when we're inside an institution that's been very authoritative, that has had a lot to do with creating cultural narratives. It's so powerful. It's really hard to say, is this correct? Can we do things better? You know, that's very, very hard.
Yes. And well, that led you to write your beautiful book, Unbroken, Reclaim Your Wholeness, where you speak a lot about a lot of these things, where so many people feel broken, especially when they're struggling or suffering. And my, are we a suffering society right now? And yet we get to redefine these stories that we tell ourselves and the ones that we've learned. So I'd love for you to share about these ideas and really what you come to understand about this.
Everything is story. We stop and think like that's the way the human mind works. That's how, populations of human minds work. We understand our reality based on stories we tell, stories we've been taught. And I think if we accept that, the truth of that, then we know that everything's up for scrutiny. If something doesn't feel right, go somewhere within the institution of conventional healthcare and you ask for help, but something about it doesn't feel right, anything at all, as an example, you get to question that. First, you get to understand that what your body is saying to you when you don't feel comfortable, that is knowledge you must have, that it's not something to be discarded, something that's wrong with you. It's something really important that your body is telling you. And then you get to scrutinize what's happening and you get to question it and you get to make a different decision for yourself. When you understand that everything is a story, you begin to understand, and I'll speak for myself. It helps me understand that I get to scrutinize that story and I get to accept it because it really works well with who I am and it's supports me and it sees me the way I need to be seen. Or I get to pass it over and move
Mhm.
along. So that's really one of the most important things that I try to communicate to the clients that I work with, and often have to because they've come to me, many of them, after having slipped through the cracks, gone undiagnosed, or they've gone diagnosed, but nothing has helped. And it's really important that I help them understand that what we need to do first is just look closely at the narratives. We get to change those. Just because a system failed you or you were not seen, heard, known in the way you needed to be, you weren't helped, doesn't mean that isn't available to you in a different way, through it, looking at you through a different lens. And that's really hard for people to understand at first. But once they get that and then they get to experience that, like that's part of, the evolution of a human life. That's so important. Because, if we stayed attached at the hip to everything we were told about how the world is, how our lives should be, we wouldn't get anywhere. We really wouldn't get anywhere. So it's about like just bringing this really fluid notion of growth and evolution of the human being and applying it to our systems so that they, like our system of medicine, so that it becomes more valuable to us as people who are seeking support and healing.
Yes. And to
Yeah.
that point, how do you feel that those stories that we're carrying inform symptoms? Is there a correlation between those stories that we're holding on to or struggling within affecting the landscape of our reality? Whether, yes, it's through symptom manifestation, and even how does that inform the landscape of medicine that we're seeing today?
I think that there's been a loss of understanding that what we experience in our bodies is part of the language of our bodies. So symptoms are, the things that we feel, the sensations we have, the aches and pains, everything that we experience in our bodies is a language that is communicating something very specific to us. We've kind of, I think, in large part, lost that ability to like be fluent in that language. It's like we're not taught that it is a language. But medicine will tell us that joint pain with fatigue and shortness of breath could be an autoimmune disease that we call X, Y, or Z. And that's a thing that's broken about us. It's a disease. It's something that's going wrong with the body. And then, we're given some kind of strategy to manage it. Usually in conventional medicine, we're given a drug strategy or something along those lines. It stays at the superficial level of saying that this cluster of symptoms that you've described is this thing that we call a disease. And here's what that disease is, and kind of looking at it in a very superficial way. And here's what we can do to address your symptoms in terms of making you feel better, lessening pain, lessening, the magnitude of the symptom, rather than this deeper conversation with the body about what those symptoms are trying to say. What is that language about? And where is it trying to take us? Is it trying to take us to a strategy for just sort of managing the discomfort? Or are they trying to take us to some deeper understanding of what's going on with us as an organism that makes us have these symptoms? How do we look at them in a deeper way? How do we get to the root cause, which may tie into all kinds of things that are missed by the purely disease focused, looking through that disease focused lens. It could be tied into what happened to us as children. It can be tied into how we're unable to live our lives authentically the way we would want to. So there's so much to being a human being that has everything to do with what happens to us and what leads us into medicine. And I'm looking at that, especially because I am a physician and this is what I do. And this is how I encounter people. But we're just this incredible treasure trove of information about so much more than I think we've ever really even imagined. Yeah.
Yeah, so if our bodies are giving us messages, and I feel like people get stuck there, right? We can tell, like, oh, it's giving us this rash, it's giving us this pain, and we just want relief. How do we step into a space beyond that, where, yes, conventional medicine can do its wonders and bring in that relief, but it doesn't often heal that root cause? What have you seen and understand more as you've looked into this space what are some of those root causes and what are some of those things that we're missing because of the way that medicine is set up?
That is true. So if we stop at symptom management, we lose the opportunity to understand the root cause. And that not only does that leave us vulnerable, because if you treat the symptoms and not get to the root cause, you still have problems. And I'll just give you an example, one of the most common diseases treated on the planet, and that's heart disease. If you're diagnosed with heart disease or a heart attack and you have a stent placed in one of the arteries to your heart because there's a blockage, you've accomplished a whole lot, right? So now there's fresh blood flow, there's relief of symptoms. There might be medications you could put on as well. There's relief of symptoms, but the underlying causes, which can be many, heart disease is an inflammatory disorder of the heart that injures the blood vessels to the heart. Blockages can occur. It's very complicated. And if we to just treat how this systemic inflammatory issue is affecting the heart, we do a lot of good, but the person remains vulnerable because whatever is going on system wide that is generating that much immune activation and inflammation, it's going to land somewhere else as well. And so the way I look at it is that people are still very vulnerable. They can have repeat heart problems. They can have vascular problems in the brain, stroke, dementia, and on and on and on. So there's a lot of potential future suffering if we don't address it at more of a root cause. And the root causes, ideally, it leads to us to an exploration of what I call the terrain of life. Sometimes I call it the terrain of healing. It's really everything that we experience as human beings has an effect on how our genes are expressed. It has an effect on how our biology evolves. And, this is simple science, but I think what I've learned, especially since I've learned to look at these problems more globally and more kind of in a whole person way, we have science as well as intuitive wisdom that links every part of our lives or our terrain, links it back to what happens with our health, what happens to us in terms of symptoms, what happens to us in terms of suffering and pain and feeling stuck. And it's very complicated. It's very dynamic. It's hard for me to even like put it into simple words that people can understand. But it's just like everything affects everything. And everything in our lives, it affects our biology because our biology is part of all the rest of us. And when we can learn to look at our problems that way, then we have this whole incredible landscape of places where we can place our attention, where we're being asked to heal. When I think of symptoms, I think of them as they're our body's way of asking us to heal. And if we kind of really look and contemplate, look at our terrain, look at all the elements of our terrain, you're going to know. We all know. We all know what needs our attention. Like we all know what needs our attention right now. Like even in this conversation, we can all name three things that really need our attention. And sometimes not. Sometimes there are important things that we don't even realize are is there and is calling to us. But yeah, it's about discovering the richness of being a human being. This is such a rich experience. There's so much to the experience of being a human, and there are so many inroads to understanding and healing our suffering that we just aren't offered by a system that looks at us as disease categories and simple symptoms that need, to be suppressed. And there's so much more. There's so much more to healing.
Yeah, there is. And so if the body has its own language and if there is really their own stories being told through the manifestation of symptoms, how does one start to connect in and listen to what that is, start to go in and how do we get to that root cause? I know it's going to be different for everyone depending on who they are and what it is, but really, how do we start as a society and group of humans who are doing this work and saying, I'm ready to go deeper, I'm ready to get out of this suffering and find that language, find those stories and understand them? What does that look like, or what can that process look like?
And it is a process. So it's
Mhm.
not like, oh, I've just decided I'm going to look at, I'm going to like explore the language of my body and out comes the answer. And it might be a multi-year process of you working with yourself, working with people you trust. And there's this evolution of understanding of what our needs are. And they're changing all the time because our lives are changing. And where I start with my clients is I just want them to have a process for checking in. And I don't really care what it is. Everybody's so different and everybody's lives are different. I think it's best to start really small. So, I'm talking about start a 5 minute check-in process every day. And maybe that's journaling. Maybe it's just you're paying attention to yourself. The first thing we all need to do is just have a certain awareness about who we are, what's going on with us, what's going on with my body today, how am I feeling? And then, having a way for having a conversation with yourself so that you can literally ask yourself what you need. And it's possible that not much will come up, especially if that sort of practice is new to you. And I think it is difficult for some people to check in, to visualize, to even be able to describe what's going on in their bodies, to describe sensations. I've had clients who just literally, they can use a few words, but they can't really describe what's going on in their bodies. Or, sometimes people, they can't give me a chronological history. So it's an interesting process of having people learn ways to check in with themselves that fit them, that they're capable of. And sometimes it's not direct, it's not a direct checking in, but it's like learning to become more present and in trying to figure out a way to become more present to oneself.
Mm.
Because if we have a language that's sometimes really elusive, we have to spend a lot of time checking in and just becoming familiar with what's going on inside us. You know, Many of us are going to need guides. Functional medicine is a whole person orientation and gets a lot of what you and I are talking about. And so, having a person like that who's very knowledgeable about how to interpret what the body is trying to say in terms of sensations, feelings, lab tests, and putting that all together, having good people to work with. But that self-awareness piece is we have to have that because we're bringing ourselves to the people we work with, right? And we need to have agency over what happens with us. It's ideal that we have agency over what our outcomes can be. I think that's what most of us want, even though it's hard. I think it can be very hard.
I think it's hard because a lot of us self-abandon, right? We lose ourselves. We have not been taught to listen. We have these moments where I think we know what's going on, but someone overrides us or tells us, no, that's not the case, and we question ourselves. And so I think that brings
Yeah.
me to you talk a lot about needing safety and belonging in this process as well to help you along this journey. So I'm curious if you can talk about why are some of these ideas we're speaking to beyond just the body or the symptoms or emotional? Why is there actual biological foundations here in this safety and belonging that can support us in our healing and through this process?
I feel like safety and belonging, well, belonging begets safety. I feel like safety is the foundation of all healing. We have to feel safe. And the human body, the human organism is actually designed to prioritize safety. It's like our whole biology and psychology is organized to keep us safe. And, that can mean a lot of things. That can be, physical safety, emotional safety. I mean, these are huge. Safety should be like a critical part of a healing approach. so that people learn to trust and feel connected to themselves and their interior experience and all their inner knowing. And many of us don't feel safe so easily or naturally, or it's easy to sort of kick us out of a safe space and we can feel unsafe in certain circumstances. And I think there's a lot of reasons for this. And certainly prior experiences that we've had in which we didn't feel safe, especially as children when we can't sort it out. And we tend to more assign self-blame and shame for the ways that we are brought out of safety or we're brought out of belonging and connection. We're not held with, compassion and understanding. And we bring that with us. And it informs what happens to us today. The other thing I'll say about being in a body that is organized around survival to a certain extent is it requires a lot of energy and resources to survive. And the more in a survival biology we are, the fewer resources we have for having robust energy and being able to open up our potential and possibilities as human beings. And this is just how we're built. This is how our organism is built. Energy and resources are shunted to what we need to survive first. So if we're persistently sick, we're persistently under high stress, we have unresolved stress or trauma issues from the past, that puts us into an organization that is geared towards survival, and we're shunting those resources just to stay alive. And I see that every day in my clients, and I think that's a very important to understand that that is why so many people can't, move from persistent illness into repair and restoration and ultimately resilience is because we have finite resources. And the resources that you enjoy as energy and vitality are, they're limited and they are less and less available the more we're stuck in some kind of survival trajectory, which could be a persistent infection. It could be allergies. It could be we have inadequate nutrition to run all the business of the bodies. Usually it's a list of things that we've accumulated over time. Or we have children and a job and we're juggling all the things. I mean, this is really ordinary stuff, but especially in this world today, in our culture that is based on, so much competition and hard work and hustle, there are so many reasons that we become depleted because we're trying to support being in survival mode 24/7. And so there aren't resources and energy available for the healing that we're also asking for. And so that's a lot to say about the safety survival issue and belonging, but it's huge.
Yeah, and
You
I
know?
almost want to continue on that thread a little bit because I think
Mhm.
that many of us are waking up to the realization that that is our reality. That, wait, I don't really want to be a part of this, but I've been so deeply ingrained here in this reality. How do I step out? How do I start to reclaim when not a lot can change for many of us? There's a lot of pressures or reasons, and yet I think
Yeah.
there's still so much possibility for each of us to start to shift. And so that brings me to what you kind of talked about how we are so adaptable and capable of change. But when we're stuck in these cycles and we're stuck in this inflammation in the survival mode, what do you want people to understand about our capacity to evolve and move beyond this?
The capacity is
Yeah.
unlimited. And that's a sad statement because that shows you how even those of us who have unraveled a lot of the parts of our lives that we know have not served us the way we've wanted them to, or have just depleted us of energy and resources and attention and focus and all the things we want for other parts of our lives. Some of this is science, the science of epigenetics, where, gene expression. We don't even know the limits of how we can shift gene expression, which is affected by absolutely every aspect of our lives and our life experience. And when we shift genetics, we shift biology. We shift possibilities. And that same logic can be applied to the brain, neuroplasticity, which is the energy of epigenetics in the brain space, and just how near unlimited, like we don't even begin to tap the potential of our brain. And we can literally, through so many avenues, increase the number of neurons, increase the number of connections. We literally change the structure and the function of our brains through all kinds of things, what we think, what we feel, what we do, what we eat. And I feel like we haven't even come close to understanding how truly unlimited our potential is. So we have that on the one hand, we have all this vast potential and possibilities, which is there, but then we're all so stuck. I say us all, I've done a lot of work on myself, but I'm always finding new things to work on in within myself. There's always something new. So it's a conundrum, but I think it certainly gives me hope to understand what my potential is. Sometimes I might feel like really, oh, just like I'm completely overwhelmed by something I'm trying to shift in myself. And I could literally remind myself about epigenetics and neuroplasticity. And oh, yeah, that's right. It's real. It's a real thing. And I can even think in terms of neuroplasticity. Like, okay, what are the things that just help my brain loosen the binds to the suffering and the ways that I feel stuck? How can I? Oh yeah, I can laugh. I can walk in the woods. It's so profoundly helpful. It's very hopeful to think about the science of possibilities and human potential, and then think about, the little ways that we can all use that information to begin to create shifts in our own life so that we can feel a little freer, feel a little less stuck, feel a little less stressed.
Yes, yes, absolutely. And I think it's so important. A lot of what we've touched on and what you've really spoken to is so many people get drawn to these conversations or these topics to go, okay, I'm finally going to heal and then I'm going to be fine and my life's going to be so much better. When in reality, I think that's not really the goal, that there is something there to illuminate and to learn, but this is a lifelong journey. It's really about setting those foundations, that reset within yourselves again and again and again. And so it brings me to the idea that where you really challenge the idea of healing being about fixing ourselves and constantly fixing. So I'm curious, what is healing in your view? How has that definition changed throughout your learning and time as you've aged and learned more within your own self and body as well?
That's a really good question. And, yeah, fixing versus healing. And healing doesn't mean perfection. It doesn't mean there's no suffering. It doesn't mean life isn't hard, because life is all those things. And in some ways, the hard parts and the imperfection are lead us to, I think, some of the most beauty, really. We fix things that are broken. And I think it's really problematic for humans to think about themselves as parts and pieces and problems that break and then need to be fixed. I think it's incorrect, and that we're really already miraculously whole. And I want us to reconnect to that notion and learn to understand our suffering and the ways life is hard as like an invitation to explore, to shift. And maybe it's just an invitation to understand things on a deeper level for ourselves, to understand our own truth so that we can live lives that are more us, that are more authentic for us. And it's just, there's always going to be hardship associated with that. And not that it has to be that way all the time. And not that suffering is the only portal, right, to growth and healing. I don't believe that either, but it can be a incredible portal if we learn to receive it that way and not just here's this bad thing that's happened to me randomly, because that's just not how things happen. I mean, if some things do, feel a little random at times. I got Lyme disease this spring. I didn't ask that tick. I didn't ask for that. You know what I mean? But it did help me. Well, it helped me be patient, slow down. I had to heal, and that was hard. And a lot of things went undone. It also helped me think through, okay, what is my body needing right now? How can I improve how I'm eating? How can I, so I had to go through all the things and make adjustments. So it did turn out to be a positive experience, and that it gave me a chance to do all those things. And even going forward now, I feel like it's like a new lease on life. So the difference between healing and fixing and healing, it's a little obtuse because I think we could all come up with very different definitions of what healing is, but it's definitely not fixing.
Yeah, I almost think healing is it's kind of in an investigation that maybe doesn't even have an end point, but it's really just this
Yeah.
curiosity of life. And you spoke of truth. Through healing, we find our truth. And yet I think that's something that really is hard for people to grasp or understand. But I think it lends itself to when you understand your truth, you have more purpose and healing just kind of comes along the way. So I'm curious, do you think many people stay stuck because they've become disconnected from their truth and what truly gives their life meaning? How does that all come together?
Yeah, I think even thinking about ourselves as parts and problems that need to be fixed, I think that is a demonstration of how disconnected we've come from ourselves. You said the word curiosity. I think living life with curiosity would be another way to look at what healing is. And like you said, it is a lifelong path, if we choose to see it that way. And living our lives, living our individual lives and collective lives with a sense of curiosity, and also, I think, a whole lot of compassion. That's a healing journey. I think that's a good kind of a good way to look at what healing is. I think purpose is really important. And the way I think about purpose is it's what I do, what we do when we're living our most authentic life, when we're living most authentically, when we are most connected to ourselves. So it's not like, I think we often look at it as like our purpose is, oh, this mission we're on, or this job, and, our families. And those are often things that are part of our purpose, especially if, we're engaged in those things as our authentic selves. But I really have come to think of it as, whatever it is we're doing and however it is we're living that is born out of being our most authentic selves. And then it changes, so then our purpose is changing. But we're doing what we do, with sort of a heartfelt understanding of who we are. We can think of it as, and sometimes it's something we're contributing to others, sometimes it's what we're doing for ourselves, which I think is just as important when we're talking about what is purpose, is how we view ourselves, how we take care of ourselves, how much space and prioritization in our lives we give ourselves. That's, maybe that's a little nebulous. When I heard other sort of narratives around what purpose is, it just sometimes rings a little hollow when it's about, I don't know, it's like, oh, that's how it's supposed to be. It's like somebody's giving me a description of how, what should our purpose look like? If we have a purpose-driven life, there's like shoulds and supposed tos, and you know what I mean, associated with that.
Yeah, the
Um,
big goals, the things that we're
yeah.
attaining, the success that's going to come. But I really
Yeah.
like that you described it as being an authentically led life. You are purposeful in every moment, and you can find purpose through each moment if you are showing up authentically. But kind of back where we started, that's a hard thing to do for many people who have never witnessed that or aren't shown that or are copy paste what social media and others show a woman or a male or whomever should be to be purposeful or successful in the society. And I think that probably is a big root to a lot of our issues today.
I agree with you 100%. My formative years were before social media. Oh my gosh. Like, how much harder would it be, you know,
To
to,
find yourself, to be
Yes,
able to be okay with yourself. Mhm.
absolutely.
There must be some kind of grand experiment happening on a social level, psychologically, humanity, evolution wise, with what we're moving through. But, this conversation feels so far from that reality, which I'm okay with.
Oh yeah. I mean, it's our culture is what it is, and it's not all nourishing. And, it's filled with all kinds of narratives, and some of them are supportive and they reflect back who we really are and can be and our potential. But there are so many narratives that, I mean, if I were an alien and I were like, looking at social media as a way to get to know this planet, I would think, God, the good things aside, there are good things on social media. But there's an awful lot of like superficiality and
Well,
stuff.
I found a way to come back to where we started in that you said the
Yeah,
word nourishment. And I think
yeah,
where we're getting to is social media is depleting, right? And not just social media, but I'd say our culture right now. There is a
right.
lot of depletion. We are
Yeah,
we are stressed, we are tired, we are anxious, we
yeah,
are not sleeping well, we are depleted, our soil's depleted. There's
yes,
so much there. So I'd
yes.
say coming back to from your lens of
Hmm.
what I think healing is almost akin to nourishment, right? Nourishment of the body, the soul, the emotions,
Yeah.
everything in between. And so, what do you believe would be a more integrated model of nourishment, of healing, of medicine, where we can reclaim wholeness? And I know that's a huge question, but I'd say more, I love the nebulous level. I love the higher level of how can we honor both science and what we know and the absolute necessary aspects that that's given us, as well as the soul, and how can we bring that forward into practice?
Well, first of all, help parents raise their children. Like, I don't
It
even know
starts
what
with
to
the
say.
babies.
Like, I don't
Yes.
even know where to start. It's so huge.
Whole
We need
reset button.
we need a whole reset for uh, families and family support and communities, and it's almost like not go back to prior notions of the village and the care and the support and the nurturing necessarily, but to evolve into that. We're all here, most of us, in creating our own nuclear families. We left our previous nuclear family. Many people are very fortunate to have extended family members as part of their local communities and are involved in raising the kids. But so many of us had no help. I mean, help people feel safe, help moms and dads and families feel safe, and to create that for their children, and to nourish them in all those important ways, like having access to healthy food, information about nutrition and how to eat well. That has to start at that level. I mean, that's not the job of medicine, though we should certainly be, that should be part of our approach to people. But I shouldn't have to explain to somebody about the nourishing qualities of food and how to obtain that. Like, as an adult, we should know that. That needs to be incorporated into, early childhood experience and be available for young parents. It comes down to having as much available in our communities to help everybody feel safe. That's where living a healing life needs to start. Like, I'm working with clients all the time. I'm working with myself, and there are all innumerable ways to begin to bring in safety and reconnection and the foundations of just living a healthy, grounded, connected life. We can do that. We can do that at any stage. But I think you asked me for that utopian. I think you asked
I
me.
love to throw that to people. I can't help it because I want it so much, right? Because I feel like there are answers and I'm like, where's the reform? Where's the policy? Where is the activism around these conversations?
Where is it?
It's here. We're doing it. We're doing our best to start
Yeah, we're
getting
doing
people
it.
think about it.
We're
Um,
doing it.
But I love that you start with mothers, with families, because I think the earlier we can get ahead and start to nourish from day one, oh my gosh, what kind of society and culture can we begin with. But even if for those who are deep in motherhood or beyond it or older and are still just coming to this and go, wow, I've never been taught this, but I'm curious, how do I start this now? What would you say to them? Like, what is just that like first piece of, maybe they understand this a bit or maybe they don't, but what would the advice be to those who are like, yes, I hear this, I resonate with this, I want more of this?
Trust your body. Listen to your
Yes.
body. Trust your body. You know when you're overwhelmed. Like, just as an example, you know when the hell you're overwhelmed. I can tell you, like, especially when I was raising my children, I had so many things to juggle. I could tell you the times. Here's the witching hour. This is when we got, when we got home from school, and I could just tell you all the times when my body was like, ah, and I didn't have the tools then that I have now, or the people watching to say, you're overwhelmed. Let's do something about this. Let's find out what you need. Let's ask, what do you need right now? If somebody had just looked at me and asked me, that would have been a miracle, and it may have changed my whole life. So for those people who are listening to this and they want in on this safety and this reconnection, and just ask, your body is very likely already telling you in some way or another what you need. And I don't know how it is necessarily arising for you, but it's probably something that has gotten your attention. You may understand it perfectly well and are trying to sort out what it's trying to tell you, but you also may not know. You may be like, oh my gosh, I have everything I want. I have this great job. I have these beautiful children. I have this wonderful, spouse, partner, whatever. But why am I feeling so anxious? I don't know what to
Mm.
do with that. Well, it is not random. It's not because your nervous system is dysregulated. That's not it at all. I find that word very problematic. It's become very popular to call anxiety, depression, emotional nervous
Mhm.
system responses as dysregulation, when really it's truth.
Mm.
It's information, however you want to look at it. And I think we need to look at it. I think we're all being called to look at it. Don't pass it off as random. Your body is always going to tell you the truth.
Thank you. I think you're exactly on. I think that's a great way to end this conversation and let that land with the listeners of there is so much wisdom within, and it's not always about doing more, because I think sometimes we want to shift into, okay, well, now I have to do more and figured it all out. Can you step back and listen and uncover and go from that place?
And do less.
Do
I think,
less.
I think
Yes.
that's more our problem than what needing to figure out what to do. We actually need to be,
Yes,
you know?
100%.
Yeah.
Hugely. So, thank you,
Yeah.
Karyn, so much for this conversation. It was very insightful and helpful, and I hope the listeners got a lot from it or just took one thing that really landed. And before I let you go, will you tell my listeners where they can find you and what you have going on?
My website's my hub, KarynShanksMD.com. My new book is Unbroken, Reclaim Your Wholeness. It's available everywhere. And my contact information is on my website for anybody who wants to reach out for any reason.
Thank you so much. I appreciate
Thank
your
you.
time.
Thanks. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for being here today. I am truly grateful you chose to spend this time with me and be a part of this community. If this episode resonated, I'd love for you to leave a rating and written review because it helps Intuition Unlocked reach more women who are ready to live clearer, bolder, and more self-led. As a thank you, screenshot your review and email it to me, and I'll send you a resource to support your next step. And until next time, root into your truth, rise into your power, and radiate your light.